I'm at sixes and sevens this week. Partly, I think, because I've got to go for some tests this afternoon, and I'm a little bit anxious. But I thought that Tim Davie and Samir Shah, the BBC bosses, were going to testify in Parliament at a committee hearing of the DCMS tomorrow. Actually, it was yesterday, and they discussed Hugh Edwards and his financial situation and the future of the BBC. But several elements need to be unpacked about this. Firstly, Edwards' alleged actions, the subsequent fallout, and the steps the BBC have taken are indicative of a larger challenge for the broadcaster, both in terms of its reputation and its operational integrity. Hugh Edwards, this is the man who announced the death of Her Majesty the Queen 2 years ago, once as trusted news presenter, has faced severe legal and moral scrutiny following his arrest and conviction related to indecent images of children. And the revelation of his double life came as a shock, especially considering his prominent position at the BBC. And one pressing issue is the £200,000 he earned after being arrested before his resignation. And the BBC's demand for the return of this money reflects their desire to rectify the financial and moral doings, the moral error associated with his continuing salary during that period. But that is their fault, not his fault. And their clawing back is just inappropriate. It shows the BBC as incompetent and behaving inappropriately. Tim Davie has said that recovering this sum may not be straightforward, and the legal channels that may need to be pursued are complex. So, in fact, in order to get that money back, it will probably cost as much money as the BBC will gather. It just comes across as maladroit. That money shouldn't have been given to Hugh Edwards in the first place, given the fact that the BBC was already aware of the issues. The damage to the BBC's reputation from this scandal is immense and is not improved, I think, by clawing back this £200,000. Edward was seen as a figure of public trust, and the discovery of his crimes directly undermines the credibility of the BBC just as much as the Jimmy Savile stuff, particularly its news department. The public expects the BBC to act swiftly in such cases, and the delays in retrieving the money, or the delays in the spectacle of that money being paid out in the first place, complicates the issue. More broadly, the episode calls into question the BBC's internal controls and vetting processes, especially for high-profile figures. Moving forward, the BBC needs to grapple with multiple issues, multiple challenges. The Hugh Edwards case is just one of many issues highlighting the BBC's vulnerability. Samir Shah's remarks yesterday about the need for deep systemic analysis of the BBC's Israel-Gaza coverage, for example, suggests that the corporation is aware of the broader concerns about its editorial practices and its favouring of Palestine over Israel, its use of language to describe the Hamas terrorists as its mealy-mouthed approach. The BBC should be putting forward a very clear statement that this is not about teamwork. This is about news gathering, and it's about an honest assessment of the news. We're not in one team or in the other team. Donald Trump's statement that Kamala Harris doesn't support Israel is absurd, as if Israel is some sort of rugby team or football team. And the same issues should be thrashed out when discussing the BBC's editorial bias. Allegations of bias during the Israel-Hamas war have contributed to doubt about the BBC's impartiality or honesty. Nobody can be impartial. This elevation of some sort of code is a nonsense. What the BBC should do is aim at impartiality and admit that there is room for bias and room for opinion. I think what we need is a little bit more honesty from the BBC, rather than this assumption that the BBC is the voice of Britain or the voice of media integrity. The BBC is simply a voice, and a very good voice. And this obsession with objectivity and with adherence to electoral guidelines, these are just guidelines, and they need to be broken. And Shah's acknowledgement of bias in reporting Middle Eastern conflicts is significant. The BBC's global influence means that its coverage shapes international narratives, and any perception of bias can have far-reaching effects. So demonstrate that this is news, this is opinion. And so somebody who does that very well, by the way, is Maya Tusi. And I think it's a very good starting word. I don't do it well because I'm fully aware, or I hope my audience is fully aware, that even when I present news items, there's always a bias. There's always an opinion creeping through, and I hope I indicate very clearly whether I like some characters or don't like some characters, and I hope I'm then fair to them afterwards. So even if I dislike Suella Braverman, I hope I'm broadly fair about it. If she does something right, I will acknowledge it. It's very rare. It's very rare, but I would acknowledge it. But I'm not neutral at all. Why would I be neutral? I am not a public broadcaster funded by UK taxpayers. I don't aspire to impartiality and balance. All of that on my part is negotiable. It's not, I think, on the BBC's part, and I think rather than claiming this is what the BBC does, I think one should say this is what the BBC aspires to do. And a thematic review is a good idea. There was a call for this yesterday, especially one focused on Middle East reporting, and that signals the BBC's understanding of the gravity of the accusations that have been made against it and the need to restore its standing. The future of the BBC is deeply entwined with its ability to maintain and project public trust. And the Hugh Edwards case serves as a stark reminder that individuals within the organisation can damage its reputation, particularly when those individuals have been elevated to a position where they represent the institution. And therefore institution accountability is crucial. The BBC must demonstrate transparency in handling this case, both legally and financially. And additionally, that broader internal evaluation of how the BBC covers sensitive geopolitical issues, particularly in conflict zones, will play a critical role in re-establishing its position as a trusted global broadcaster. If it fails to do this, it risks losing its hard-earned credibility in the eyes both of the public and of the international community.